Hello, I'm Jan and today I'm going to show you how to paint water lilies. I live near a pond that has lilies in the summer, but some of these I found in public gardens for you to enjoy. This demonstration is water lilies, which in Northern Europe are mostly out in early June. My local pond sometimes has them out in late May. The leaves vary in colour depending on whether it's a new leaf or one that's perhaps been slightly submerged by its neighbour. But a lot of them are bluey green. And you've got to consider the colour that you're making the leaves versus the colour of the pond water. So we'll just do one, for example, as a bluey green. Mostly got a telltale shape. And the important thing to note when you're painting water lilies is everything has got to be flat. Nothing's going uphill. So we've done a water lily. And it may well have almost black water next to it if it's in shadow. Or brilliant blue or white clouds reflected. So you have to consider the colour of the adjacent water will affect the green of the water lily. I'll just fade that out. Now you could have brilliant blue sky at the other end of the pond. Still the same pond, but it's just the reflections vary. So are the leaves all the same colour, or are you changing the leaves as the water changes? Well, in most cases, leave the leaves the same colour and let the water change. I'm just doing this as an example for you, and we'll put a cloud in there. And then you can have a reflection of a tree. The reflections are always slightly darker than the tree. So it's a very dark green. There might be reflections of more than one tree in the area. So you can vary the greens. Don't use the same one all the time. So it's just an example. In the mornings, the reflections will be different to the afternoon. So if you're not happy when you go to the water lily pond or the local lake, go back again. Some public gardens, you get a ticket till 5 o'clock in the afternoon and go back again at 9 o'clock the next morning when they open again. Just have a look and see what the situation is. Now this is going back to blue here where the sky's reflected. That was all done with a size 8 brush. I'm now going back in with a size 4 to highlight some more shadows and reflections. This is an example on thick cartridge paper. Watercolour paper might have slightly different result, but you don't want anything too rough because you want to show the surface. You have to pick the paper for the subject. The water lilies will be a fairly uniform colour except where the leaves are dying off, which they might have yellow edges, or if one's under another it could have a dirty edge, just slightly discoloured. Just use some water to mix it in. Some of them will have patches of yellow on. Do one with a patch of yellow here. But it might not be yellow all over. But you don't want it to look as though you've done every other one a different colour to sort of give a random effect. You want some uniformity. And the gaps between the water lilies are as important as the water lilies themselves, and the variety of reflections. So this is just a close-up sketch to give you the rough idea. Whole lake. You don't want to do the whole lake because it just looks like dot, dot, dot. So what you've got to do is to select a portion to paint and highlight those, and then the ones that are all together as a mass, you can always just give the shape of a cluster of the water lilies, but just carry on with the way that they grow together. And you could always have the warmer colours at the front and the cooler colours at the back if you want to give it some depth. So the more bluey greens at the back and the more vibrant greens at the front. But they are all a bluey green. And the flowers come in all colours. My local pond has got yellow water lilies. These ones are white. You can get them in pink. I think every colour is available. Now the sky is giving a reflection, but the water lily pads are so close to the surface, on the surface in fact, that there's no reflection from them. I'm painting with the travelling sketch box today, but it hasn't got a very big area for using as a palette, so I've got the big box on the go as well, just to use the palette area. I'm just going around the leaves, painting them the way that they are floating. If something circular, you try and do it circular rather than doing straight lines across it. And there are some variations of light on it, but this is on the cartridge paper. This is just to show you how it's done. Sometimes it's better to do a slice of a watercolour pond rather than the whole thing. It just otherwise looks like dots or spots. The leaves do go on top of each other and cause a shadow. So where there's a slight shadow, you can just go round with a dark colour, any dark colour, just put in an indication. Also, the water is quite dark from reflected trees. And it's actually much darker than these leaves, so I'm going in again here for a second coat to show that the water lilies are lighter than the shadows. I'm still using the number 4 brush at the moment because I'm going into a corner. When you get away from a tight spot, change to a bigger brush can be better. This one is number 8. So I'm going to mix up very dark colour, blue and black, and just go in to show that the reflections from the trees are darker than the water lily pads. And they're not all shadows are solid. There will be some variety there. But if you've got the darkest colour and the lightest colour adjacent, doesn't matter if the rest graduates out. What you want to is a bit like punctuation. Punctuate the viewing. Obviously on watercolour paper that's sized, you'll get a very different result, but this is, say, is a working drawing to show you. And then I've got a pad here that's quite yellow. Different colours depending if they're an older pad or a newer pad. I've mixed yellow and crimson here just to show that it's an older pad. Just naturally biodegrading. You can see that the reflection is darker. I'm just going to warm up some of these leaves a little bit to add a little bit more contrast. I'm just using chrome yellow just to go on top. Just give it a little bit more contrast from the cold water. You can see you can make the leaves any colour you like, and it's the space in between the leaves that is as valuable as the leaves themselves. There's more of a cluster in the background, so what I can do is just go in with a cooler colour which indicates that they're further away. You can highlight a few that are close up. Because if you're nearer them, you would see them differently. Now the flowers come in pink or white or slightly cream, or even on the pond a few yards from where I live, yellow. So you've got to decide on the colour you want to do. And I think today, because there's a lot of cool colours, we'll have a warm colour. And I'm going to make a warm pink. And I'm just going to pop it in. And I'm going from the middle out to the edge of the petals. Got quite spiky petals. They're not rounded ends, they're pointed. And just add a little bit of water, send the paint away a little bit, dab it off. It'll give an indication of the middle of the flower. I'll do the same with this one. So I've already drawn the middle of this flower in because it's bigger, so there's more detail showing. Just go round. And then add a little bit more. And when that's dry, I can just highlight it a little bit. Highlight a little bit now. A slightly different colour. Because it will be picking up light from different directions. And there's another one that's not very open. Just pop that in. Some of the water lily petals are slightly submerged, that one's just knocking another one down. So where it's under the water or in shadow, it'll be slightly darker. If you want to emphasise that, this one's slightly sinking this side, you can make the other side brighter. So compromise, you don't have to make one very dark, just have the balance between the two. And there's a lot of dark edges. And little ones popping out. You've just got to decide on the level of detail that you want to give your picture. But this should give you a start, and then the ones in the background, you just mix up a big lot of paint and put them in without the detail, because if they're further away you won't see the detail. So I've got a nice lot of paint and I'm just going to follow the shapes. When it's dry I can put in a few darker lines to give a little bit more edge. I'm just keeping my brush moving all the time. So it's worth making up a reasonable amount of paint to do this. And then you don't get any edges while you're filling them out, mixing up another batch. I have to put some pencil on so that you've got a rough idea of what I'm trying to show you, but what you can do is just rub it off slightly. So that's all the leaves done now, apart from two on the right, which are quite light compared to the background of the reflections. So just let that dry and then I can highlight it. I'm just going to make it more of a sunny day, a little bit more blue to give the contrast to the water lilies. I'm just putting the ultramarine paint on top of the shadow I did earlier, just to harmonise it all. But the idea is that you have lots of changes, but the leaves are constant. You can have reflection of clouds, so in that case the water will be white. So you don't need the whole picture the same colour. Use water to fade the edges. And you can have a reflection of weeping willows, which are often by ponds, which give a different direction to the reflections. Little curly leaves. Just ring the changes, you don't have to have the same thing everywhere. You're the picture maker. And just make these and the cluster a little bit more dominant. Just putting some yellow on top of them. So this is cartridge paper, so it's just a working drawing. But I hope that gives you an idea, and we'll move on to the watercolour paper next, where you can get more subtle changes. I'm making up 3 different greens to start the picture off, because some of the water lilies pads are different colours. They're in the sun or they're more recent leaves. So I've got sap green and Zillion crimson, sap green and yellow ochre, and sap green and lemon yellow. I'm just painting the leaves in one area because I don't want to stick my hand in and smudge them. This is Langton £140 paper, and I'm using a size 8 synthetic brush, which has got a reasonable point. And I'm just putting in a series of leaves. Some of them are overlapping. Just to claim the space. And now moving on to a number 4 brush, I'm just going to put a suggestion of a stem. And there's a slight change of colour around the edge of the water lily pad, which is almost bottle green, and to gently go round. With water, just gently fade it out slightly. Flower that's slightly submerged, it's looking a bit yellowy. All adds to the atmosphere of a pond. And then a quite well defined flower. And when you're painting these things, you have to look for everything. And I'm trying to make up a pink of permanent rose and crimson. I'm just going to start from the middle, and then the edge of the petals are white, so they all radiate out from the centre. And what I'm going to do is use the water and just merge them in the middle here. Just pull them up a little bit so they're less defined. Do a lot with a lost and found edge. And there's another one that hasn't opened yet, that's very clumped. It's quite yellow. Now, interestingly, the pink one has got a lovely reflection in the water, so I can put that in. Reflections are always a tiny bit darker. And some green. This one hasn't got a reflection because it's almost touching the leaf, but it has warmed up the leaf a little bit. And this one that's central hasn't quite got so much pink. Maybe that it's at a different stage, or it might be the angle that we're looking at it, but it has magically got tiny reflection in the water. Not much water showing, but enough to give the reflection. I clean my brush, dry it, and then just feather it out again. Because it's standing up, it's a different colour because it's catching the light in a different way. And causing a nice dark reflection. This leaf is curled up a little bit, so it's got a dark edge. It's just where they're perhaps half a centimetre or a centimetre above the water. It just causes an edge. And this is slightly yellow in the middle. So I'll just put a little bit and then take it out with the water. And the reflection again is darker, so I can make it a bit darker around the side. Now I can proceed with one or two more, and then I can put in some water there. So I'm mixing up sap green and crimson. And then there's lots of bluey green as well, so I'll use some ultramarine. And I'm going to start at the back and work forward using a bit of each colour. It's not uniform. Several leaves overlapping. Where they're overlapping, there's a lot of yellow, probably because one leaf's older than the other. Just carry on like this till I've done a few more, then I'll show you how to do the water. Where there's a clump of leaves that are overlapping, if you start with yellow ochre in one area and a little bit crimson, a little bit of French ultramarine, you add to the suggestion that it's more than one leaf. Just keep going with the variety of blue versus yellowy and reddy greens, and you'll get the pattern of the water lilies appear. Don't rush, just go in gently and slowly, and some of them are curled up, and where they're curled up I think there's perhaps dust collecting. Depends if it's rained recently. They're all factors that affect big flat leaves. Just merge the greens together, but don't make them too wet. Keep it under control. And you're giving the illusion of lots of different areas. And you get some that have got a red hint and others that have got yellow ochre on one side. There's all sorts of different things going on. And you can just backtrack, put some shades in if you need to. and some enormous ones. These two are on top of each other. So to separate them, I'll go in with some blue here where this one goes round. Just gently work it all in. And this one, its friend, can be more yellow. And they're instantly separated. There's a nice, lovely curve here. I will, when it's dry, take the pencil back out. I didn't put too much pencil in, but you do need to mark where you're going to paint something like water lilies, because they can grow and you need to work to a slight plan to give it sincerity. I'm just leaving room for another flower. Just leave room anywhere. You can always rearrange it. When these are dry, I'm probably going to go over with a bright yellow, like chrome yellow, and just put a few highlights on. But you have to start somewhere, and the water will be going next, and it is a very crowded illustration I'm doing, so a little bit of punctuation wouldn't go amiss. But there are actually leaves absolutely everywhere. There's not much water in this area, which shows the flowers more. But whenever you're doing it, follow the shape of the leaves. Right, I think that's probably enough. I'll give it a moment to dry and then look in this area here, which has got some interesting shadows where the plants have curled up a little bit and there's shadows of a tree. So I'll look at that in a moment. So the flower here again is pink, this variety. And to separate it from the green, it probably needs to be overemphasised as pink. Clean the brush off completely and then just move it all out a little bit. Now, so there were some interesting shapes here that got lots of reflections and leaves that are half buried in the water. They've sunk a little. So sometimes you have to leave things out because you can complicate it too much by putting them in, but I think we'll fill the gap a little bit. You don't have to be a slave to detail. Changing colour as I go. I haven't had any crimson for a minute or two, so we'll put some of that in. And then some blue. Gives all the changes of the colours. And then the bits that are sunk I can do in a moment. But they are all overlapping each other. Now I'm going to let that dry and then starting this side, put the very blue water in. I've mixed up a mixture of French ultramarine and cerulean blue, or you could use turquoise. And I'm just going to go round the water lilies. This is a pond, so the water is probably completely flat. This is quite a warm day and the paper's quite warm, so the paint's soaking in quickly. When you're doing this, the water will keep changing colour over a pond. It won't all be exactly the same. You just have to look for changes. Which is why I've started in this corner, so that I can establish a colour scheme. And then when I get to the water lily up here, it's got pointed white petals. So the safest thing to do is to draw around them in pencil and then rub the pencil off afterwards. Or use latex. Or if you're very confident and you've got a steady hand, you can go around with a brush. But it's easier to do 1 or 2 petals and go around them. But if you've got lots, it can be quite difficult. And we're going to highlight the lily pads afterwards. And I'll change my colour now because it's further away. I've taken the cerulean blue out. I'm just using the French ultramarine. And so the paper is very warm. So I'm just going round the flower. It's only the reflection I'm going round at the moment. I'm going over the stem that's slightly submerged, but having done it in green first and it's completely dry, it will survive. And I'm going to highlight the leaves afterwards in a little bit of yellow. I've just got a dirty finger on the leaf. I'll just rub it off. Some of the leaves have got a bit of blue anyway. Doesn't matter, it's all part of the painting process. This flower here, slightly submerged. It's past it. But it's still there, so we're giving an indication of it. Now I've got to go round the water lily, which it's got points, but they're even. So what I'm going to do is just go round, going away from the flower. Going back to the original direction. Now I've got to go to an edge here as it's drying so fast. It's further away, so I'm making it more silvery. You can't stop when it's like this. You've got to keep going. Otherwise there'll be a hard line. If you fade it out to nothing, then you can add a bit more later, but you can't stop in the middle of the water lilies. And for the next water lily, I'm going to put some latex on so I can show you how to do it that way. The reflections are always slightly darker, so I'm just going to go in with a little bit of Payne's grey on top of the pink, which was permanent rose, and one that isn't labelled. There's nothing on it. This happens quite a lot when you buy them from different places. It's a Royal Talens, and it's just got a number, so it's just a nice purple. We can look it up if we want to, but it's academic. It's what suits the picture. I've looked up the paint without a label, and it's cobalt violet. And then the flowers much darker in the middle. And I have put some latex on the white areas, which I'm not sure is in exactly the right place, but it gives you a starting point when you're working with different colours. I'm just going to use a clean brush and just move that out a little. And then get the blue paint and go round the white petals. I can feather that out. Just text there as well, so I will get something. Sometimes latex is a bit clumsy. You're better off with a brush and just working it back afterwards, but we'll just try it this way and see what happens. And then it's blue right up to the reflections, where I left a little bit of white because I wasn't sure how far I was going. One colour bounces off another. So I'll just use the brush to lose the line a little. And then because it's on the waterline, it's got a dark skirt. So we just go round in a circle to separate the top flower from the reflection. And I think with a dry brush and moving the petals back exactly, it'll be better than the latex, but I wanted to show you both ways. So moving on to this one. I'm using permanent rose, crimson and the purple. And there's not much reflection here because there's other flowers in the way, but there is some. And then around it there's a hint of blue. By putting the latex on first, you can bring the blue right back, but it still might not be in exactly the right place. So it's always worth working it back with the brush afterwards, and then you can be sure. Now I haven't put every single water lily in here, so I can put some more water. Photo is only a starting point, and in these public gardens you have to take a photo because there's often a theatre queue of people trying to get by you to look at the water lilies as well, and you just can't block the path. I'm mixing two blues together here. I've got cerulean blue and French ultramarine, and I'm just going to put some more in here. Using some water to just move it around a bit. You need different amounts of water depending if you're painting on a very hot day or a very cold day. And today the paper is quite warm. Just just working my way around the gaps, and then when I've done this, I'm going to put more definition on the leaves, because some of them are curling over each other and they're different colours, but initially I've just put various greens on to mark the space. You have to make the decision that you're painting the water lilies and not the whole lake. So if you've got a few flowers in key positions and you want to punctuate them with a little bit of detail nearby. In here there's lots of leaves upturned and things, so I'm not going to do that blue. I'll come back to that in a moment. One leaf pushes another one up and you get all sorts of interesting shapes. And some reflection. A tiny, tiny bit of blue to punctuate it, so we can put that in. And there's another leaf that's trying to open here, and a flower. So I'll pop those in. It's just starting to happen. I'm just going to get a clean brush. It's a harder brush. I'm just going to feather the top down because I'm not sure how far it goes. I put some latex on there. I'll give it a soft edge. If you're using the latex, you've got to resist touching it until everything around it is dry. I've given the latex some time to dry and the paint around it, so I'm now going to rub it off with my finger. And then I'm going to get a flat brush, clean water, and just gently go in the shape of the petals and claim the space. Just by going up to the top of the petal and just finding the shape in the blue water. So this is often better than latex. You can be more subtle. I've removed some of the paint from the tips of the water lily flower with a dry brush. Now this is a round brush that I paint most of the watercolour with, but in comparison, if you use a flat brush, you can actually touch the paper very gently and just remove any pigment that you want, just to make it more punchy or gentle compared to latex. And you can also do it with the leaves. Some of these leaves would have a little bit of dust on, or they'll have blemishes, and you want to highlight one or the other, and you can just gently use a flat brush. They do come in various sizes. This one's a bit big to get into any nooks and crannies. So the smaller one's better for control. Some of the water lilies have got an edge to them where the leaf's curling up. They're going on top of each other, some are standing up. So what you have to do is to decide where to start and stop your painting. You can't paint a whole lake easily and give the detail. You have to decide you're painting the water lilies and not the entire lake. But I hope this gives you an idea, and that you go out and find a water lily pond near you and start painting something while they're in season this month. That's the finished water lilies.